Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. In January 2015, we launched the Sikh Manifesto. Sikh Manifesto set out a number of issues, a number of demands relating to the Sikh community. At the start of that manifesto, you can go onto the Sikh Network website and read it. We also set out some of the history, some of the context about Sikhs living in this country. Right from Maharaja Dalip Singh as the very first Sikh who was brought here to the UK by force to live here. And we talk about the Sikh contributions in the two world wars. We're marking currently the 100th anniversary of the First World War, or the Great War as it's called. It also talks about Sikh sacrifices in India itself. The Jallianwala Bagh in 1919. Sakka Nankana Sahib, which you watched on KTV. Jetoda Morcha. The Sikh sacrifices in relation to independence in 1947. These are all part of our Anglo-Sikh history, and our demands and our needs need to be seen in that context. What we did, almost a year after the general election of 2015, was the Sikh Network developed and managed the UK Sikh survey. 4,559 people responded, the largest ever response to a survey in relation to Sikhs. And what they said through their responses were a number of things that are positives. Our contribution currently to the UK. So let me run through some of those statistics. Firstly, let me talk about education. 58% of those that responded to the UK Sikh survey said they were either studying for a degree, had graduated, or actually had done postgraduate degrees. Now let's look at the national picture. Only 27% of the entire population can be compared to the Sikh community. So more than twice the number of Sikhs go to university and get degrees than the average person in the UK. So education should be no barrier to being successful. If I look back at my own life, I was born here when my father came in the 1950s, and these stories will be played out in most homes with the first generation, second and third generation, is that our parents and our grandparents came to this country, and the one thing that they wanted to do was to make sure their children and their grandchildren were skilled, were educated, and that they could make a success of their lives in all the professions that exist in this country. So therefore we owe a lot to our parents and grandparents, and we should never forget this. Now, education is also something that our gurus taught us about. We are Sikhs after all. We are learners. We are educating ourselves. We are learning every single day. Therefore, we know that percentage of 58% will grow with generations to come, because we will also get our children and our grandchildren to make sure that they have the right level of education to make a success of their lives and make sure our community is a success. In 2011, at the last census, only 8% of Sikhs had no qualification whatsoever. Don't forget, the census includes everyone. So this would mean people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, possibly even 90s, who might not have had an education or a very limited education in India. So therefore, in our community, the census said 8% had no qualification. Compare that to the national average, 22%. Compare that to the Muslim community, 23%. Therefore, at both ends of the spectrum, what we're finding is More and more Sikhs are being educated in this country to degree level and beyond. And a very small percentage of our community, largely I would say the elderly, have no qualifications whatsoever. And this is crucially important when we talk about jobs, when we talk about progression within jobs, when we talk about our representation in different professions, talk about representation even in politics. Education is not the barrier. Now let me talk about another statistic. I'm going to talk to you about home ownership. In previous censuses, it's shown that the Sikhs have the highest percentage of homeowners than any other community, including the Jewish community. What the UK Sikh survey showed that 92% are owner-occupiers. In other words, they own their own home or in the process of paying off a mortgage. In other words, very few Sikhs actually rent. Now, this is important because Sikhs want to be independent. They want to have their own homes. And if we want that as individuals, if we want that as families, it also means something about the Sikh community as a whole, the Sikh Gaum. The Sikh Gaum also needs its home. Because with your home, you feel protected, you can defend your position, you can also promote your position. Let me just give you a couple of examples linked to this. In the last few days, we've seen a Sikh in New Zealand being abused. It's been caught on video camera, been in the national and international papers. And what did the person abusing him say? Go back to your country. We've seen very recently a Sikh shot in Seattle. And what did the attacker say? Go back to your own country. Question is, what is your country? What is your home? This is a different issue, but it's set out in the Sikh manifesto. But this crucial thing about home ownership shows that we as individuals, we as families, want our own home. Let me talk about another statistic. If you look at the national level of unemployment, it's running about 4.3%. The Sikh percentage is 2.1%. So if you look back to what our gurus taught us, get the karni. You must earn an honest day's living. And the statistics bear this out. On average, 4.3% of the population is unemployed, but within the Sikh community, that percentage is 2.1%. These are important statistics that we must remind politicians about, policymakers about, because if you're in a job, you are paying your taxes. And if you're paying your taxes, you have certain rights. So therefore, if we're being very well educated, clearly we're going to get jobs. If you own your own homes, you can only own your own homes if you work. So these issues are all interrelated. But we should not be penalised for being overeducated. We should not be penalised for owning our own homes. We should not be penalised for working. Let me talk about one or two other statistics relating to the Sikh contribution. I spoke earlier about the two world wars. The First World War, 1914 to 1918. We're now in the middle of that 100th anniversary. And what we know is that Sikh men wearing turbans came to Europe and went to other parts of the world and sacrificed their lives for the freedoms not only we enjoy, but Europeans enjoy, the British enjoy. And we asked within the UK Sikh survey, how many of you had a family member who fought in the First World War or the Second World War? And what it showed is 22% of you had a family member who fought in the First World War. That means more than 1 in 5 of those probably watching today in the UK had a family member who fought and probably died in the First World War. 34% of you had a family member who fought in the Second World War. And therefore, our contribution for the freedom of Europe, sacrificing our lives for the freedoms we enjoy. And these were turban-wearing men that came to countries like France, to Belgium, and died for the rights we enjoy today. And it's important for us to use these statistics that aren't available anywhere else and tell people our story, the story of Sikh sacrifices for the freedoms for this country, because they fought for crown and country, because then the British ruled India. So the British promoted our identity, the British promoted Sikhs within the army, and the British welcomed people from India, many tens of thousands of Sikhs. 83,000 Sikhs lost their lives in the two world wars. Over 100,000 were injured and maimed. These are huge numbers. Don't forget, the Indian population, Sikh population, was 2%. And yet our sacrifices in those world wars, fighting here, were on a huge scale. And so there were questions within the UK Sikh survey relating to those Sikh sacrifices. One of the demands set out in the Sikh manifesto was the need for a site in central London to mark Sikh sacrifices in the First World War. And 4 out of 5, 80% of you said they felt that the British government were not doing enough to recognise that sacrifice. Now, let me turn the clock back to January 2015 through to May 2015. Every single politician, every single candidate that fought those general elections said this was a no-brainer. That's how they described it. This is a no-brainer. There has to be a site in central London to mark the huge sacrifices by the Sikhs. And yet, coming up to almost 2 years later, that site has not been identified. Now, we will keep on fighting and asking for our demands. And we will use these statistics. But you should also, when you meet your politician, talk to them about what your family, what your fathers, your forefathers did for the rights we enjoy here today. And shame them into saying that, Sikhs died for this country and you can't be prepared to give us a site in central London. Not any money, just a site. So make these linkages between the UK Sikh survey and also our demands set out in the Sikh manifesto. I'm going to now talk about a separate statistic which also shows the Sikh contribution. And this is the extent to which Sikhs give charitable donations. What we're seeing is that we have a concept within the Sikhom of daswand, taking 1/10 of our earnings, those honest earnings that we've accumulated, 1/10 of our time. And what we find is whenever there's a disaster in the world, Sikhs are the first ones to dig deep into their pockets and donate to charity. And what we asked in the UK Sikh survey was the extent to which each and every person that responded to that survey gave donations. 1 donations to Gurdwaras, 1 donations to British charities in this country, 1 to Sikh television stations, 1 to charities abroad, such as in Punjab or elsewhere. And what we found is when you take that all together, the amount of charitable contributions that the average Sikh makes, and you multiply that up by the number of adults, those over 18 that live in this country, and it comes to a staggering £1.2 million per day. Now you might think, that's a huge number. How can Sikhs in this country be giving away £1.2 million per day? Well, the answer is, what does that mean in terms of how much a person has to donate a year? It comes to £1,095. That's what came out of the survey. That every single Sikh, when you added up how much they donated to the Gurdwara, to British charities, to Sikh charities, to charities abroad, it came to 1,095. Now 1,095 is less than Adas one. Think about it. Most people earn more than £10,000. Therefore, it's a realistic figure. Now you multiply that out for every single adult, multiply it and divide by the number of days, and it comes to 1.2 million. So in other words, we're making a huge contribution to our Gurdwaras, to Sikh charities, to non-Sikh charities. In fact, we're probably giving more to non-Sikh charities than the average non-Sikh. So we're not even discriminating, in favour of Sikh charities and Gurdwaras and other charities. And this is another statistic that you must play back to people. That we are educated, we work, we own our homes, but we still dig deep into our pockets to help others because we believe in the concept of Sarbat Tabla. We do Ardas twice a day, and we talk about Sarbat Tabla. So if you take the combination of these statistics around the Sikh contribution, it shows that we have a very positive story to tell. A story which must be put in the context of the challenges, the demands that we face. And I think if you handle this as individual Sikhs, as individual Gurdwaras, as individual communities, when you talk to politicians, decision makers, use the Sikh survey, use the results in the Sikh survey, say this is what we're doing. Question for you is, what are you doing for us? What are you doing with our taxes? Why are we facing discrimination? Why are we facing abuse and hate? Why don't we have Sikh schools? Why don't we have a site in central London? Why can't we have the truth when it comes to 1984? These are just some of the issues where we're relating the Sikh manifesto back to the UK Sikh survey. And the issue of contribution should not be used against us. Often we hear we're our worst enemies. If we're successful, then the government says, well, Sikhs have nothing to worry about. They're doing well. They're educated. They donate money to charity. They own their own homes. Most of them work. But actually, why not celebrate contribution? Why don't other communities take the Sikh example? Because there are plenty of other communities that could learn from the Sikhs. Earn an honest living. Build your own home. Work. Contribute to charities. Don't break the law. We could go into many other statistics which show the Sikh community in a very positive light. And yet, what we often hear is negativity around the Sikhs. Sometimes issues that are internal issues to the Sikh community around doctrine, and the media portrays them in a negative light. It must be put into context of the Sikh contribution that we make. So just to sum up for KTV viewers on the issue of the Sikh contribution, that there are a number of statistics which show we are doing well in this country, but those must be put alongside the issues that face us. And actually, where we are doing well, where we're making contribution, actually helps in our arguments to say, why not? We deserve more. That was the motto of the Sikh movement. We deserve more. We deserve more in terms of our historical contributions. We deserve more in terms of our current contribution. And it would be the failing of the state and the failing of politicians and decision makers if they didn't recognise that. And therefore, I'm going to finish this aspect of the Sikh contribution to say, let's think about KTV, a new channel that's bringing programs like this to share knowledge with you, to arm you with information to make your lives better. We also have a duty to dip into our pockets, our very deep pockets, and help the likes of KTV, because we will go from strength to strength if we support our own media that talks about your rights and the rights of our community and what we can do if we work together. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.